Jacqueline Gallion, City of Spokane Valley. At the last month's meeting, your legal counsel confirmed what I have been telling you all for a year and a half. Ms. Fossum properly described that for an involuntary binding exclusion order, it cannot exceed 10 days, and the excluded student must be informed of their right to challenge and petition for relief in Superior Court. Then astonishingly, Ms. Fossum stated that we never reached the binding order level during the MUMPS exclusion, and that the exclusion was voluntary.
Were they all the voluntary exclusions, recommendations, or did they reach the level of the health director saying, no, I am issuing this is binding? Did it ever get to that second level?
I don't understand that there was ever a formal health officer isolation and quarantine order issued at that point.
It appears that this agency conducted a long-term, intentional, cooperative, and coordinated campaign to conceal this illegal behavior from their governing board, as well as defrauding the public of their rights. This fraud was accomplished by both failing to disclose the facts and actively by conducting the sham special meeting. How could a meeting to overturn a mandatory exclusion not include the fact that exclusions weren't mandatory? Beyond this, Spokane Regional Health District personnel planted stories in the media to promote the fiction that the notification box on an exemption form constitutes an agreement, which it does not. Board member Stratton asked what she can do to help us. What you can do is require the district to follow the law.
Thank you.
If it is a voluntary request, I'm almost done. If it is a voluntary request, then ask us. It is not, if not, take us to court. We should never have been here. We should have been in school or arguing in front of a judge. I welcome the chance to show a judge that exclusions don't work and are dangerous. Is this the proper behavior of a government agency to its oversight board and to the public?
Jacqueline,
Thank you.
So when my predecessor declared an order for schools to comply with exclusions, it was a voluntary aspect around compliance, assuming that, again, people would comply with that request. It was not an involuntary order. When the concern exists that there will be non-compliance with the order for an exclusion, then you go again to a much more, if you will, aggressive form of ensuring that that exclusion is followed through with. That's when you bring in the sheriffs. That's when, again, going to maybe level 4, when you actually, again, involuntary quarantine, where, again, you actually have to go to court.
It seems like if we're ordering someone to stay out of school, then they have some due process rights to appeal that if they want to. But
my understanding, Brian, is that an order, but again, it's a very strongly suggested request, because even at the top of that document, you see that it's labeled as request for voluntary quarantine.
it feels like we're saying, well, we're making a request to the school district, so if they do it, then it's really, they can go through the school district policies of appeal as opposed to the health officer policies of appeal. And maybe it's not that clear, but that's what I want to be clear on. If someone disagrees based on science, where do they go to make that appeal?
If we get to the point where somebody says, not going to follow it, and Dr. Lutz says that's a risk to the rest of us, then I would be asking a court to issue an order to make that person stay out. And at that point, that person would be able to access the court and say, I think the district is wrong, and call their experts and do that whole process.
If I was a parent and I got this, I would not understand it.
There is a paper that shows that memory B cells are inadequately produced by the mumps vaccine when you compare it to measles and rubella. As I'm sure you all realize, that inserting a new mumps vaccine strain into MMR and the possibility of spending millions of dollars to develop such a vaccine is not an attractive option. But it should be thought about because, as you said, this is an attack on vaccine confidence. And but anyway, I think there are biological reasons why the vaccine is failing.
Thank you for that.
Stephen and his sister Rebecca were kept out of school for 3 months.
And I realized I was falling behind really fast. The online classes are like the hardest, so I fell super behind in those because I started 3 weeks behind.
But Stephen, a sophomore, still has time left. Rebecca, a senior, doesn't.
This whole mumps thing completely robbed me of the experience, which was the worst thing ever.
Rebecca is in Running Start, but she stayed involved with extracurriculars at Rogers. At least she did until January.
Now I get to watch all these people that didn't even earn it go to the places I wanted to go for 4 years. Like, this was my last chance, and I couldn't even experience being a senior.
Rebecca and Stephen both say they disagree with the health district's policy.
And there's nothing wrong with us. We were just out because we don't agree with that vaccinations are the right thing to do.
I was labeled as a dangerous person. I'm not a threat. The statistics speak for themselves. My dad works at a local university where I have free tuition, but I may no longer have the chance to get into that university because my grades have suffered so much. My A's turned into C's and my B's turned into D's. I was required to take finals and I had no idea what the material was on.
I suffered through a total of 8 weeks of exclusion from school this last year. When I returned to school, my peers knew that I was excluded and started to make fun of me and my beliefs. I even had one teacher who was essentially bullying me because she did not like the fact that I was not vaccinated, and I had to drop her class.
On April 19th, one of my son's friends took a gun and shot himself in the head. He explained in the letter why he felt that this was the only way to end his suffering. And he said that the pressure of trying to keep his schoolwork up to the grades needed to gain entrance into his target college was too much to bear. It is sadly ironic that in pretending the exclusion was helping stop the spread of near harmless infection, that the health department and education system potentially contributed to a suicide mortality. And shame on you for hijacking this outbreak to push your vaccine zealotry.
It doesn't work, but was it ever needed? No. This is not according to me, it's according to the CDC themselves. It's according to Donald Henderson, who was head of the World Health Organization's smallpox elimination program, a senior man at the CDC. It was not needed. The Department of Health in the UK, the vaccinologists, did exactly the same study. They said, we do not need a mumps vaccine. It's a trivial disease in children. So how did it ever come into being? It is dangerous, and I believe it was a commercial strategy. This is a question to Donald Henderson. How do you feel about, for example, the introduction of the mumps vaccine? Has it been a success or not in your view? Was it necessary or not? Answer, Henderson, no. We looked at the data, and you know this isn't really a bad disease. The cost of this is minimal. Why do we want to add a mumps vaccine? This is from the CDC themselves. Maurice Hillerman of Merck somehow or another got to a guy by the name of Dr. Roy Feimster, who was the health commissioner in Massachusetts. And he persuaded Feimster to mandate that all children in Massachusetts had to have the vaccine. And from then, another state kind of joined in, another state, and finally they said, oh, to hell with it. Oh, to hell with it. That was the scientific basis for the introduction of mumps vaccine, mandatory mumps vaccine, to children in this country. That's the science right there. It doesn't get any worse than that.